Hello everyone. Welcome to Wyckoff Farm Museum. My name is Lavada Nahon and I'm a culinary historian, and we are here to learn about Pinkster. Pinkster is the oldest documented event we have of African cultural transitions remaining here in New York during the colonial period. It goes from the 17th all the way through to the early 19th century. We have documentation of African languages and drums and other cultural parts maintaining themselves at a time when many of us grew up believing that the African drum had been outlawed. It had, but not here in the New York area. Pinkster happens all over the region that was once New Netherland. Today, that is New York, New Jersey, Delaware, northern Pennsylvania, and southern Connecticut. We have notice of large events happening in New York City and in Albany, and smaller gatherings probably happen throughout the region as well. The enslaved here in New York did not live on plantations as many of us have come to know them. Farms like Wyckoff, with acres and acres of land, did not have a separate slave quarters, did not have hundreds and hundreds of enslaved picking cotton. What they did have were a smaller number of enslaved, many of whom probably lived within the house itself. They worked on the farm and as domestics within the household. Our cash crop is not cotton, it is winter wheat. It is planted in the ground in the fall, starts to sprout, and lives under the snow. And then soon as spring comes, it shoots up and it's going to be harvested in the middle of the summer. So the heat of the summer will allow those grains to dry, so when they go to the grist mill to be ground into flour, they won't clog up the wheels. The majority of that flour will go into ships on the Hudson River or in the Atlantic and head down to the Caribbean and the West Indies. They will become the food for the thousands of enslaved that are there growing sugar on the vast sugar plantations. New York is directly connected with the transatlantic and Indian Ocean trade. Pinkster is the Dutch word for Pentecost. Pentecost is the second feast of the Christian church. It happens 50 days after Easter. This year, it is on May 23rd. It will go anywhere from the end of May to the very first weeks of June. It floats on the calendar just like Easter does. When the enslaved want to celebrate, this is a rare time for them because they are actually given anywhere from 3 to 5 days off so they can go and travel to the larger gatherings that will be happening in the region. Pentecost is on a Sunday, and Sunday is the sacred day, so they must remain in place. They will be quiet. Perhaps they will start to travel on a Sunday, but it is on Monday that many will have time off. They will then go to the gathering place. The big celebration will happen on the second day, and that gives them an additional day to get back to wherever they are enslaved. This time is very important. Unlike the South, where you have large communities of enslaved living together, here in our region, most of the enslaved are living on farms like this, 1, 2, maybe up to a dozen people. But more often than not, they're very isolated. Pinkster is the one time of the year that they perhaps will see friends that they have not seen for the whole year since the last Pinkster. They will see family members that they have not seen in that whole year. This window of time around Pinkster is because in the agricultural historical life of New York, not very much is growing. This is a time where all the cultures can take a short breather before getting into the busyness of producing the food for the summer, harvesting the wheat, getting ready for fall. The next break will not happen until December when we get to the winter holidays. If you're going to travel to Pinkster, as I imagine many of the enslaved did, you will need to take with you what you need. We're accustomed to bags and African women carrying things on their heads. Today, I actually have a pack basket. We know that many of the Lenape or other tribes in our area did weave baskets for Dutch and European merchants to put on the market. So what would I need in my basket? Well, I'm going to start actually with some type of, I'm using it today as a tablecloth, but perhaps this will be the ground cloth, creating a table on the ground where me and my friends and family can sit around and enjoy our meal. I'm going to need a blanket. We know that many of the enslaved have their own blankets because they talk about them, and wool blankets. Wool is imported from England here, and so they would have had a wool blanket. Wool is warm. I know it's a beautiful sunny day now, but this morning it was a little chilly. And as you get into the wooded areas, you'll also have that early morning dew. If it rains, wool will help propel the water off you, so you have your blanket. I'm gonna need to take with me something to eat with. So I have a wooden bowl, and I also have a cup of some kind so I can get something to drink. If I am fortunate, I may even have my own pewter plate. I will have a spoon to take with me, maybe a simple table knife that I can sharpen, or if I'm lucky, I'll have a small paring knife or a sharp trade knife that I can have with me for cutting things up. Today I have a bigger bowl just in case I want to put something in my stew. All of this can fit in my basket that I can take with me. Now, you see these large pots. Well, I know I'm going to need to cook, but this is not a pot I can take in my basket. So I'm hoping that someone living closer to the gathering grounds, like the Catherine's Market in Manhattan or Pinkster Hill in Albany, will bring the bigger pots with them. But for myself, I can take a small porringer. I can boil water in this. I can use to make a cornmeal mush that I can have for breakfast, or that I can make thicker and have as a bread. I can even heat up some leftover stew or make a small soup for myself. But these will become the things in these pots, and even my small one, that I will share with my friends. This time of year, as the enslaved were moving, they're probably foraging for things they can eat along the way, as well as things they can have there. So what do we have? Right now, all over, dandelion is growing, and we still eat dandelion greens today. Dandelion is not native to New York. It actually was brought here by the early colonists. And as you know, those beautiful puffs allow the seeds to spread. And as they do, every year those plants get bigger and bigger and bigger. So I can pick these along the way. Many of us have wild spring greens growing up in our yards or somewhere near us. These will give me flavoring to add. Perhaps my owner allowed me to take some red pepper or cayenne pepper with me to spice things up, or even maybe a little salt. I could have tied those up in small rags and also shoved them in my cup so they don't open up, and store those in my baskets. Here in the New York area, we are very fortunate. We're surrounded by so many streams and rivers and estuaries. We forget that clams and oysters lived in huge beds all around us. So that's something that we can also forage for and eat. The forests and the wooded areas between the farms are full of small game. you have rabbit, you have raccoon, you have all sorts of birds, you have wild turkey, the small game, things that people can trap, people can fish. So all of that, everyone working together will give us enough that we can share over the time that we are together. What is a celebration without a feast? Pinkster, for many, has gone from the memory here in New York, and Wyckoff and other historic sites are working with historians like me to help all of us get back into celebrating this very important part of African American history. As we became a new nation, days like 4th of July and election days started to replace Pinkster. In other areas, like in Albany, Pinkster was outlawed, so people were no longer allowed to gather. These types of things played into memory, moving us further away. Juneteenth, the celebration of the ending of enslavement that happened in Texas and is celebrated on the 19th of June, has come into our area and is also spread all over the world. It is important for us to commemorate Juneteenth, to remember the ending of legal enslavement here in New York and in our nation. But it is also vital for us to go back and reclaim Pinkster. One of the challenges we have is that we often get stuck in the slave years. We forget that those enslaved here in New York did not come from here. They came from amazing cultures in Madagascar, the Kingdom of Congo, Angola, from Benin, from the areas that we now call Nigeria. They were Dahomey and Fan and Yoruba and other African tribes all coming here together to create a new people. That their traditions, they had culture, they shared it amongst themselves, they kept it alive. And it is important for us to embrace the pride and joy and the wonderfulness that is Africa, that remains here in our cultural heritage in New York. So I invite you to come to historic sites in your area, whether that be Wyckoff, Dyckman, further up in the Hudson River Valley. You can go to Cralo, you can go to Schuyler. There is not a place, there is not a town, a city, anywhere in the state of New York that does not have a historic site of some kind related to the 17th, 18th, and early 19th century. Many of us walk by them day after day, and we never step across the threshold. Get curious. Get curious about the history that we have here. As the interpreter of African American history for New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, I really encourage you to get curious about those that were enslaved here in New York. I thank you for your time. I thank Wyckoff for having me here again, and I wish everyone a happy Pinkster!